Hello again, and welcome to episode 7 of Persians, the podcast. The messenger has just departed after his extraordinary delivery, confirming the extent of the Persian defeat. The Greek actress Lydia Koniordou, who has played the part of Atossa twice and directed the play, is very eloquent about the challenges facing Atossa. She must react to this catalogue of loss, but the empire must survive.
So Atossa she's holding the reins of the Persian horses, the Persian wagon, whatever you can say it. She has a great responsibility. There's huge things at stake because you cannot allow all this structure to fall apart. And it's like today I was trying to think of when I was playing it now. I didn't have this in my mind then because I was also the director, so my mind was in the performance more. But anyway, so this time I felt that it's like seeing a landscape after a nuclear bomb has fallen, which you have never seen before. And the horror and the absolute destruction, and yet you have to cope with it somehow. You have to do something about it.
As the messenger departs, the chorus again refers to the malevolent spirit that seems to be intent on crushing the Persians altogether.
Dhé atá marafach, tusa léim agus dhéon pasáilt chocróisin an gine omlán Persiach.
Before the messenger had even arrived, the chorus had advised Atossa to go and prepare libations and offerings to the soul of Darius, her departed husband. She now leaves the stage to do so, perhaps getting back into her luxurious chariot and with whatever attendants she has in tow. She also instructs the chorus that, if her son comes back while she's at the palace, they should send him to her and not weigh them all with any further calamities.
Oi, cad an brown a churann scrisiú an arm. Ó, a ís ihe, a haibh sí thugam I daireamh. Cad có fíorna is a nocht tú thugam fá ar nánró. Sibh se a cháide, dhéan sibh spar dó. Mar sin féin, de réir an méid a dordaí mhórmhocail, tasty an wem ar dúis padracha a rá dus na déithe. An sin chuci mé ríis, tar éis don brontana sí a chóirtlam don dalamh agus dus na marmh, agus teorí mé lom fianna le dorte chun na déithe. Tá is agam nach ndéana sé seo aon athro ar a bhfuil tarlaithe, agus don tochaí don am atá le teacht, ag súil go rathí nithe I bheas. Ba chóir díobh cóirle a láthair dóibh siúd a chur an muinneáin anamh. Agus má Uileann mo bhac Róm, tugadh í sólás dó, agus iomprógadh í chun an fálas chun ná líonthach a tuilleadh de tubaiste na tubaiste air.
At this point in the play, we move from worry about what may have happened to despair and regret for what has come to pass. Greek tragedy is somewhat notorious for putting weeping and suffering on stage, but in many ways this is where it gets its power. For Hamlet, the theatre is an attempt to hold the mirror up to nature, but for the Greeks, it is a bit more of a refraction. They use the theatre like Perseus's mirrored shield. Rather than confronting Medusa or any of the horrors that tragedy investigates head on, they peer at them through the mirror of the theatre and avoid being turned to stone. Aeschylus dramatizes the Persians' loss after cataloguing the fallen Persian generals and describing the battle and its aftermath. At no point does he mention Themistocles or any Greek name at all, To mention one, he might have had to mention them all. The survivors of Salamis were in the audience. Their sons, perhaps, were in the chorus. Here's Professor Oliver Taplin talking about who might have been watching.
Absolutely, they would have fought in those battles. Some of them would have lost relatives. All of them would know that the Persians had burnt their Acropolis, destroyed their Acropolis, and would have destroyed them if they'd been able to. So they were in a position where you might have expected them to have wanted to be vindictive, to have shown what absolute bastards those Persians were, what barbarian infidels they were, to try and destroy them, to try and destroy their temples. And yet, that isn't the way the play treats them. That's the great, the extraordinary surprise of this play.
The victory came at a cost, and it was recent enough that nobody could have forgotten it. It's an amazing thing that Aeschylus makes his audience imagine what it must have been like for the Persians. In the choral section that follows, the chorus questions how Zeus or Xerxes or their own ships can have possibly let this happen. In some of the most striking images of the play, they envisage the awful destruction left behind. In this particularly cruel verse, they picture the corpses that have been mangled by the sea, as if whipped apart by the waves. Their remains are being nibbled by fish, the voiceless children of the sea. And every home that has lost a man now weeps, fathers and mothers without children, bewailing their old age and this cruelty that has come down to them from heaven, as they learn the terrible extent of this loss.
Iad a smite go hulk ag an sáile, táid á nithe ag leanahí ballamha na mara gan chaim, agus gach tig a chail fear. Tá sé a cuine agus fachtar an taide agus an bháthis gan chlán a cuine le lín a sean ishe. An anró a tháinig ó neamh agus iad a fálim méid a Caitríona.
Interestingly, as the chorus reaches the end of this portion of lament, they acknowledge that free speech will now be inevitable. Aeschylus uses language that echoes the values of individual expression central to democracy, and implies that these freedoms were not so available in Persia. Yet again, we get the image of the yoke, which seems to be a metaphor for how Xerxes wields his power over the Hellespont, over Greece and Persia in his mother's dream, and now here over the tongues of his people. The chorus concludes with the image of Ajax's island, Salamis, soaked with Persian blood.
Ní chematig daoine smacht ar a deanga níos mó. Scuilfar cad ainis chuig na daoine nuair a bhainfar an king trom díobh. Agus Ealaíon Ajax suite ag a bhairige agus báite le fuil. Cemadan sé dó hain tachi na bersach.
Now Atossa returns, but this time she has come without any pomp or ceremony. The queen represents all of Persia. At the beginning, she came with all her finery, but now in this dark mirror of her first appearance, she has nothing. She holds a tray full of offerings for the dead, all of which symbolize the great bounty of the Persian earth: milk, honey, wine, and flowers. Earlier, we had an image of all the Persian soldiers being like bees who have left the hive, and now here the queen herself offers honey for the departed. This might have appeared like a common or garden funeral offering. Such scenes are not unusual in Aeschylus's plays, one of which even bears the title of libation bearers. But the queen says something very startling indeed.
A chóide, éine go bhfuil taithí aige ar an anachan, tá a isachu nuair a éiríonn ton tobaistí I gcoinne daoine ar bé, gur gná go mbíonn scanra agus uan ortha. Ach nuair a séideann neamh go bag, teigtar dóibh go mbeidh gaoth na dearg ratha I gcónaí leo. Táim hana fin lán de gasát agla. Taobh síon íháine uafara de na déthe, os chóir mo chúl, agus tá glór níthe ach gár catha ag bára mo chlósa. Tá scanran na tabaiste seo chothú fásach go bhfuil sé am thomant as mo bheabhar. Is chuige sin atá mo hlí déanta agam ón bálas gan an carabad ná na róbí bratha bhí orm ar dús, ag breth ábhar íbirte chun solas ó thabhairt de ahar mo bhic, den saisa chumad an soccer na marmh, bainne bán blasta ó bhód lán, míl lénach a tháinig ó bláhanna, fíor isce agus léacht álan ón grán finúna. Tá agam leis tarthaí cuara an crán a lóige. Agus sibse cóide, canigí amán, chun dolas na féiríní seo das na marmh, agus glíogaí a níos ar spirit Darius. Féici mé hiige go nólann an talamh na deachanna seo in honor na ndéithe híos.
At the end of the speech, the Queen asks the chorus to summon up the spirit of King Darius. Not just pray to him, but call him forth, call him back to the light. The scene that follows is one of the most memorable segments of the play. The chorus summons up the ghost of the dead king to ask for his help in this calamity. This scene was so famous and so influential that a generation later, the comic writer Aristophanes mentions it in his popular play The Frogs. No less a character than Dionysus, the god of theatre himself, announces just how much he liked this extraordinary scene. There are occasional ghosts in other tragedies, and even Death himself shows up in one of them. But nowhere else do we get a scene of raising a spirit from the beyond. You might imagine that this was Aeschylus's invention, not least since he has ghosts show up in quite a few of his plays. It might have been riveting to see him ascribing a fantastic ritual to these strange, foreign Persians. But there's no record of there ever having been any such element to ancient Persian religion. In fact, ghost raising was a Greek practice, as Professor Edith Hall explains.
The stories about Greek religion that circulated in Greece at this time were surprisingly ignorant about the actual nature of Zoroastrian religion. I mean, for people who went out in their ships everywhere across the Black Sea and the entire Mediterranean, the Eastern Aegean, and were good at foreign languages and had huge amounts of contact with other cultures. The sort of ignorance of the actual practices of other, what they call the barbarian religions, is astonishing. We do know, though, that ghost raising from some vases, we have vases where strange ghostly figures seem to be being brought up. Actually, in Greek religion, the Greeks did do necromancy. They even had cult centres where you could go and conjure up ghosts of the dead if you wanted to sort of speak to them. Herodotus has a story about a tyrant who had to go and summon up his dead wife because he couldn't find something that she knew where it was. So the Greeks actually had a famous nekiomantion, which means the mantic place for raising the corpses, which you could, if you were rich enough, actually visit. Who knows what actually went on there? But the Persians, no. I mean, they didn't even have a sort of anthropomorphic religion. I mean, they worshipped the truth and the light and the darkness and water and sort of rather abstract conceptions. It was a very sophisticated religion.
Greek religion had various unknowable practices. The oracle at Delphi was famously suffused with mystery, and the secret practices of Eleusis gave us the word mystery itself. Ghost raising was a less central element of Greek religion, and Aeschylus piques our curiosity by staging it in his Persian context. Almost every study of Persians in performance will find some way of mentioning the seminal production by Carlos Kuhn and the art theatre, the Théâtre Technique, that was a monumental success in the mid-20th century. It has been revived on numerous occasions, and I was lucky enough to do a few workshops about it with Philippos Salahouris, who was the chorus master and prepared the music for the chorus for the most recent revival. Great attention was paid to the breath, to the quality of how these elders change their attention from weeping to the guttural summoning of a ghost from his grave. Kuhn's production is a blessing and a curse for all practitioners, particularly those in Greece. Even today, any approach to the play will be measured against it. The chorus moves, dances, shouts, and breathes together, not to mention many of the cries and claps and other noises they make to summon this spirit as they will Darius to come and aid them in their time of need. Again, there is a small chance for negative or even ridiculous staging when trying to put this scene on the stage, but given the poetry of the incantations, the respect the chorus shows for their departed ruler, and the solemnity of the scene as it progresses, of course it deserves to be staged as seriously, bravely, and arrestingly as possible. It's for moments like this that the play became famous, and it's moments like this that were designed to show the huge amount of work and preparation that went into the play after all those months of rehearsal. We don't really have any tricks or choreography available to us in this format, but we'll perform the text nevertheless, and you can summon Darius in your mind's eye.
An gleisin á rí nuifa chomhá na néthe mé, nar is scuilm weim straal fada de hanga glán na marbarach. An éidó le mo gléana, bróin agus péine teach tríd, an bhfuil sé géisteach lom os na régiún íochtaracha.
Agus tusa a halamh, agus na ceannarí eile an son híos, scuilagí suas ón mhúr halaí, dia na berseach a rugag isúsa, seolagí suas é, seolagí suas é, seolagí suas é, fear nar chlúdaigh créine perse a cho bha riamh hana.
Ba anhain an bharé, ba anhain a charan chumhnacháin, ba anhain meán an duine a chlúda sé. Ildonius, bí mar chuideachta dó, seol suas réala hóir an neamhaí Darian.
Mar ná bharigh sé riamh ard bharibh le cailuint an chogaigh. Dúrachas go raibh sé chuma dé I gcomhairle leis na persigh, chuma dé I gcomhairle a bhí sé, mar de stúrigh sé an airm go maith.
Se ársa, tar chúin, tar cóngarach, tar go bár de charan chumhnacháin, Ardaí na slipéirí buí atá de chosa agus feilse an bar atá de chrón riúil. Téanaigh a ol ahir Darian.
Tar chun go gluisigh tú I déobh an oling aisteach nuasa. A bháistir na máistricha taobh sig roin. Tá ceos digíoch folúin os ard gion, de bhar líon de a bhar óg a chuig chun báis le déanaí. Téanaigh a ol ahir Darian. Ai ai! Ai ai! Tusa gur cuinig de bhás chomór son ag de cháirte. A bháistis, cad cuais na tabaiste sa faoi cho. Mar tá lunga na dí deic a bhain leis a dír seo go léir sclista. Agus ní haun díobh níos mó, ní haun dóibh níos mó.
Presumably, at the time the chorus starts describing Darius' appearance, with his formal robes and his yellow slippers, maybe my favourite line in all of Nuala's translation, the king himself comes into view. Seances and spirit trafficking don't always go according to plan in plays for the theatre, but in this case, the incantations are effective. Darius returns to speak with his people, and we'll hear what he has to say tomorrow night. Persians, the podcast, is supported by the Arts Council on Comhairle Ealaíon and broadcast as part of Dublin Theatre Festival 2020. It's written and presented by me, Conor Hanratty, and we're building the project around a new Irish translation of the play by Ealaíon. Tonight you heard contributions from Lydia Koniordou, Edith Hall and Oliver Taplin, and performances by Marie Mullen as the Queen and Bríd Neachtain and Caitríona Mhurchú as the chorus. You can catch up on all episodes and read more about the project at PERSIANSthepodcast.com. Thank you very much for your company, and I hope you'll join us again tomorrow.